Talking baseball, baseball and the O's.
Welcome back, Birdland, to another episode of the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Benny Becker. Thrilled, as you know, to be sitting down here talking Baltimore Orioles baseball with all of you. We have a fantastic episode on our hands, gang. We got a lot of big topics as spring is ending, or at least the spring training season is ending, and we head ever closer to opening day this Thursday. Boy, am I excited, gang. This is one of my favorite times of the year. Not only is optimism so high and you have so much excitement for what the season has to come, but listen, I just love having baseball on every day, gang. It's what I love to watch. It's what I love to enjoy. I'm a big baseball guy, clearly, so I'm very excited for not only the season in general, but specifically this Orioles season. I'm extrememely optimistic, as you know, if you've listened to us before. Make sure this season to check us out every Monday and Thursday for new episodes. We're going to be having them twice a week at you, gang, every Monday and Thursday during this spring training. Maybe we missed an episode here or there just because there wasn't much to talk about. But now we're into the season. Now it is time to go, and we are ready to roll with these O's, gang. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about how spring has ended and real baseball is beginning. We have some injury news to catch you up on, including Gunnar Henderson, of course, the biggest name on the list for us. We want to talk about the rotation and the bullpen and where kind of they have formulated, along with any other roster moves or any other roster decisions that's coming the Orioles' way either the last 72 hours or the next 72 hours. We also have another new signing, not necessarily the newest face, but that's exciting to talk about as well, so we'll be touching there. And usually we have a whole episode devoted to what we're going to have our last topic on, and that is how to bet the Baltimore Orioles this season, gang. We had a whole episode last year about it. I think that this year, based off of the bets that are available, I can run it through it pretty much in one segment. So we didn't need a whole episode devoted to it, but it's something that I think our fan base absolutely loves, because last year I would have made you money. This year I feel very confident I'm gonna make you money. Uncle Benny's just driving down the street throwing out free money, gang. So listen up. Make sure you pay attention to our gambling segment, because I know what I'm talking about when it comes to betting these Baltimore Orioles. So let's just jump right in, gang. Spring ends, real baseball begins. I could not be any more excited, like I told you, to see real games happening opening day this Thursday. Very, very exciting stuff, gang. Orioles in the spring training up until today's game, because that hasn't started yet, finished 13-14. Listen, we know spring training games are not about necessarily winning the game. It's not about having the best record coming out of spring training. So 13-14 is certainly good enough to satisfy us. Frankly, it's the 10th best record in baseball today. So again, while you don't keep these games and this record moving forward, clearly the Orioles outperformed a lot of other baseball teams out there. While it's right around 500, that's more than acceptable to feel good about this team. And frankly, there's a lot to feel good about this team about when you look at what happened during spring training. We had some good results, and we'll touch on a couple of those moving forward. But the main thing, and we've talked about this before, is in spring training, you just want to stay healthy. That's the number one most important thing of any good, successful spring training. We didn't necessarily succeed with that, but it also could have been much, much, much worse. Obviously, Gray Rod got shut down for a short period of time. He's still ramping his way back up. We're going to touch more on that in a moment. Gunnar Henderson, we also will touch more on in a moment. Obviously, that's the biggest name, certainly the two biggest names on our injury report after this spring training. The other injury was Andrew Kittredge, who we talked a bunch about previously, and how we actually feel like there's a chance, gang, there is a chance that Andrew Kittredge having to miss the first couple months of the season is not only what's best for Kittredge, but is best for this team. Hopefully we can get him back down the stretch in the second half and into the playoffs, where his arm will be much fresher because we know he's a little older of a reliever for us. Mostly good, though. Obviously, Gray Rod still has a bit of scaredness in my mind. It's still a nerve-wracking thing. But the Orioles seem to continue to give us positive quotes. Things that make us not be so nervous for the worst outcome being the down the road. Hopefully, that's the case. Again, we're going to talk a little more about Gray Rod, but the other injuries, again, aren't that bad. Kittredge might actually be in the best interest of not only himself, but the team. And Gunnar Henderson, hopefully, fingers crossed, does not seem that bad. Does not seem like it's a serious injury. And frankly, when you look at the performance this spring, most of the core performed well. They really did. You had guys mashing. Adley Rutschman absolutely mashed. Obviously, Bautista, who's not going to make the team out of camp, but is still one of our top prospects moving forward, had a phenomenal camp as well. Jackson Holliday seems like he really hit the ground running this spring. Colton Cowser did well. You saw a lot of guys around the diamond performing well. Ryan Mountcastle did pretty well. So a lot to be excited about. And you saw some great stuff from newcomers, whether it be Tomo Seguno or Tyler O'Neill. And really just you can see the vision of what's to come this season, gang. It's very, very exciting. And even the guys that maybe didn't perform so well for most of camp, whether it be Ryan O'Hearn or Coby Mayo, and, a few names here and there, tended to find a way to have a successful spring still. They were able to show you some positive results that makes it so you're not truly worried about them headed into this season. And frankly, as long as you're not absolutely terrible and overmatched in spring training, especially when it comes to these veterans, I don't really care what you do, gang. It's about getting your mental right, getting your timing back, getting your body feeling right. That's all that spring's about. Again, stay healthy and prepare yourself for the season. I don't need you going 3 for 3 every day. Be cool, be fun, but it's not necessary to a successful season ahead. And I'm very confident that a guy like Ryan O'Hearn, who struggled this camp, is going to be able to really turn it back on and become the Ryan O'Hearn that we've known the past couple years, if not even a better version. Because again, he's going into a contract year, and he was very unlucky with a lot of metrics last season. That luck hopefully turns around. He maybe has a star contract year, and then before you know it, Ryan O'Hearn is getting himself a huge contract from another organization in the offseason. But obviously that is a lot of future telling. Obviously that is still time to tell sort of thing. So let's just jump right back towards spring training as we put a bow on it. We saw some guys really take leaps of improvement, especially younger players. Obviously, we said Adley Rutschman was crushing the ball. And I think a lot of us don't need to see that from Adley Rutschman. But after the second half that he had last year, seeing Adley not only come in better shape, more focused, but also with absolutely stellar results all across the board, it's exciting. It makes you feel like maybe he is taking that next leap in his career. And that's a guy that we need if we as a franchise want to take that next leap in this winning way. Truly. Win some playoff games, win a playoff series, win a pennant, win a World Series. Obviously, those are the leaps. Hopefully we can get there, gang. But also some young guys such as Jackson Holliday, who we mentioned, Cade Povich. Both of those guys showed a lot this spring. They showed why they are now major league players, not prospects, players. And I think they're here to stay. With Povich, maybe not as long, but again, that's more due to roster construction, and we'll see how guys are performing. If he performs well enough, I think he gets to stay. But more on that later, To put a bow on spring training, mostly I am overall optimistic, and frankly, more optimistic than I was headed into spring training. I think you guys have kind of heard me talk about and seen this progression in my optimism with these Orioles this year, where in the offseason, a lot of us may have been disappointed with some of the moves that were made. Starting into spring training, we still might have had a little disappointment, but maybe we started to see kind of how great is shape these guys came in, where their mental was at, started feeling a little better. Well, after a month or so of spring training, we're now at the point where we're extremely optimistic, gang. I know we talked about that on our last episode, about how over the moon I am, I guess, right now on the Baltimore Orioles. That's how high I am on these O's this season. I really feel like the roster construction came together. I see the vision that Mike Elias and these guys wanted to put together. And you'd be kidding yourself if you think that this team is set right now. Just because you start opening day with one roster, frankly, doesn't mean at all that you're going to have that roster by next week, let alone the playoffs. So let's all breathe. There's still plenty of time and opportunities to potentially add an ace, if not from inside, with Grayrod or Bradish. So there's a lot of good things coming, gang, and I am extremely optimistic and excited for this Orioles team. I've been telling everyone, they're back. They really are. The second half of last season was the exception, not the rule for these guys. 2 seasons ago when they won 101. First half when they started off very hot again. That's the rule. That's who these guys are. And they're only going to become more and more entrenched in that winning as they develop into players and get a little older and get a little more situated with the league and how the league adjusts to them and how they have to adjust to the adjustments that the league made and all of these things we've talked about. This is exciting. This is a great Orioles squad, gang. This squad has the makings of a pennant winner and potentially a World Series victory. I'm telling you, gang, you heard it here first. And I think we're going to kind of touch on that a little more when it comes time to talk betting. But we're going to save that to the end, gang. We're going to save that to the end. So now let's talk about the biggest injury in camp, which was Gunnar Henderson, a.k.a. Gunnar Injuredson, at the moment. Now, it's his first IL trip of his career as he's not going to make opening day. And frankly, with the backdating rules, at first I was like, oh, he'll make the Orioles home opener. No, he won't. With backdating rules, he has to be out at least the first week of the season. So that's not a great feeling, gang. However, when you start reading the quotes from Mike Elias, from Gunnar Henderson himself, you start feeling a little better. Like Elias said, he's hopeful the IL stint will be measured in days, not weeks. Positive, very positive. Again, he has to be on the IL for at least a week of the season. So hopefully it doesn't extend past that second week, okay? They really need more time, though, to ramp him up for the season. He had the last 3 weeks off, and it seems like health-wise he's feeling a lot better. To quote Gunnar, I'm getting there, or it's getting there. It's a lot better than what it originally felt like. So he's feeling better. He's ramping up. He's been taking BP. He's been taking infield drills. And I just don't think that they're willing to rush him back like that. They're willing to kind of be cautious, which they should be with this kind of superstar player. You don't need him on day one. You need him in 140 games this year. He can miss the first 2 weeks. So where am I confidence-wise on Gunnar coming back? Obviously very confident he's coming back, but when? I'm confident it's going to be beginning of the 3rd week of the season. Again, he has to miss that first week of the season at this point. Probably, I would say, going to miss that second week as well. Just again, being cautious, ramping him up. I've seen some reports that it's very unlikely that he's back on that 8th day. So maybe it's a week and a half. Maybe it's 2 weeks. I think headed into that 3rd week, we have Gunnar Henderson back in this lineup, which is obviously a major plus for the team, for the lineup, for runs, for defense, for everything, for winning. I'm confident that this is not something that's going to linger. You know, again, like I've talked about many episodes previously, as after this happened, he had that oblique injury last year. He was able to really work himself back, but there was some worry that this would be last year as well. We would have to miss maybe a week or two of the season before he got back. And then it's like maybe the oblique's going to linger here, there. I'm really hopeful that this is not going to linger, just like that oblique did not linger. And while this year he's going to have to miss a couple weeks probably, it's okay. We'll get him back. He'll play 135, 145 games for us. And we'll have our all-star MVP level caliber shortstop the entire season. So while he's Gunnar injured sin now, I don't expect that to be the case long. And hopefully, fingers crossed, he continues progressing well and gets back in this lineup as soon as possible. Now, we're going to touch on some other injury notes. We know Gray Rod also will start the season on the IL. That is not a surprise. It's something we've known for a couple weeks now. But there's some encouraging stuff. He's actually going to make the trip to Toronto with the team, which is not really something you do if you're not progressing positively. If they're worried about inflammation, if they're worried about this or that. So all signs indicate that Gray Rod is on the track to come back relatively soon. Relatively being the word. Because the Orioles are still very confident it's not ligament issues, which is just a breath of fresh air, gang. When the news first broke, you're like, oh, here comes Tommy John. And then they were like, I don't think it's Tommy John, but we're going to get more opinions and stuff. Now that it seems like they've gotten these opinions and they've looked into it plenty, they seem very confident still that it is not ligament damage, meaning no need for Tommy John, just need to ramp him back up for the season. He's essentially starting from scratch. And so he's going to need about a month. If he progresses positively, we should see him by the beginning of May. But again, he's starting back from the beginning of his camp. So a month or so to ramp up, and he's already been doing it for at least a week or two. So again, about a month from now, hopefully we see Grayson Rodriguez pitching. Now the next guy is actually a surprise to us. This is a guy that we were predicting the Orioles might even hold back a little just for roster construction. Well, now with the Gunnar injury and some other stuff, Jorge Mateo is still yet to be ruled out for opening day. You know how much we love Jorge Mateo on this program. He actually got himself back to play in 5 Grapefruit League games. And I think part of the reason the Orioles kind of pushed this forward was because of the Gunnar injury. Also is because Emmanuel Rivera got hurt also and has to start the season on the IL. Meaning that if Jorge Mateo isn't healthy and ready on opening day, that last spot will most likely go to Levon Soto, Vamil Machine. 2 guys that the Orioles do like in their organization. And 2 guys that actually have played very well this spring. But certainly not the name you love seeing on the opening day roster. Certainly it wouldn't be a long call-up. It would be till Gunnar gets back. However, having Mateo healthy and ready for opening day would then allow you to keep Holiday at second, Westy at third. And then you can have Mateo play short. And then sure, if you want to mix it up, because it's going to be a week or two till you get Gunnar back, then you can have Holiday fill in at short. Then you can have Westy maybe move over to second. Or just have Urias play second. There's a lot of different roster construction that you can play with. And now that it's not one or the other, now that it's not the idea of, oh, if Mateo's on this roster, then maybe Urias is gone, the Orioles are more comfortable pushing Mateo forward, whereas before I felt they were going to hold him back to kind of let the Orioles roster play out for a couple weeks till they brought him back. So I'm excited. It's great news to see Jorge Mateo progressing at this point and potentially being on this opening day roster. That's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping our opening day roster has both Mateo and Urias. And then when Gunnar comes back, shoot, we can figure it out, gang. We can figure it out. So before we absolutely put a bow in spring training and head on to the regular season, one last spring training note I do have to talk about. We're not going to dig into really individual games anymore, especially for spring training. That's something we're going to bring back come the regular season, starting Thursday and next Monday. However, we had a spring training no-hitter, gang. The Orioles threw a no-hitter against the Pirates last Saturday. And just cool. It doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't mean much, at least. Certainly the box score disappears and the result disappears. But 7 pitchers combined for that no-hitter. And I'm going to argue that for the first 5, it does mean something. It is a good sign. Zach Eflin started the game, our opening day starter, and he pitched 3 innings hitless. After that, we had 1 inning each by Gregory Soto, Yanier Cano, Cionel Perez, Brian Baker, Rusney Contreras, and then Paul Skeens' former LSU teammate, Riley Cooper, to close it out in front of Paul Skeens and his Pirates. Listen, gang, we won the game 4-0. Again, the result might not matter. The no-hitter itself might not matter. But seeing those 5 guys, Eflin, Soto, Cano, Perez, and possibly Baker, all being guys that are going to make this roster, all have at least 1, if not 3 in Eflin's case, hitless innings. Just cool. It just goes to show you what I've been preaching. We have this very good bullpen. I am confident in this bullpen's abilities to be one of the best in baseball. And as far as the starting pitchers go, gang, we are getting reliable, consistent major league starts from these guys across the board, I believe. It might not be the elite ace a la Paul Skeens. We might not get a lot of 7-inning starts. But we don't really need them. Give me 5 to 6 innings of 2 to 4 run baseball. And we're in that game, gang. And that's what we're going to be getting, I believe, almost every game moving forward this season. That's the type of starting pitching staff we have, I believe. And that's why, again, I'm so optimistic in even this pitching staff when most fans maybe aren't. Most fans are a little worried about the pitching staff. I am excited about the pitchers because we're just getting solid, quality major league starts. And that's something that we're going to pivot to now and talk about how the rotation is all set with Grayrod missing opening day. It's easy to see where this rotation lands, okay? We've kind of assumed after that Grayrod news, we knew where this rotation would land, and we were accurate. Povich won the 5th spot. He had a great spring and earned it absolutely. Slim is one of these guys that I really believe could ascend this year. Does he have the stuff to potentially ever compete for a Cy Young? Probably not. Is he probably more of a really good or a solid 2, really good 3 in his career? Yeah, probably. Maybe he's never that number 1 ace. However, he has the confidence. After how he pitched last September, which was phenomenal, he has the confidence now moving forward to be that guy. And that's what he brought into spring training this year. And that's why even if Grayrod was healthy, he had a chance at that 5th spot. He really did because he outperformed at least one, if not a couple of these starters. Eflin, as we mentioned, is the opening day starter for us. That's all right. I love me some Zach Eflin. And I think that, again, he's just going to provide solid quality major league starts. After that, we got Charlie Morton, Tomo Saguna, and Dean Kramer. Pretty solid staff, gang. I love it. Is it my dream rotation? No. But the idea of having these starters and being able to add eventually to it with Grayson Rodriguez, hopefully Kyle Bradish, and the name I'm about to talk about, gang, it's exciting stuff. It really is. And I have high expectations for this staff, again, in just providing quality major league starts time and time and time again, keeping this team in every ball game so that the offense can hit and that the bullpen can shut it down. And we're going to win a lot of games doing that, gang. A lot of games. So now let's talk about the return of the Gibby. Kyle Gibson gets signed. Kind of falls right in line with what the Orioles have done with this starting pitching staff this offseason and now into spring. Listen, am I going to sit here and say, oh, yes, Kyle Gibson's back? I mean, I'm not going to jump for joy, but it's a nice quality bring-in. Again, another veteran, quality, major league pitcher who knows how to get out, who knows how to get quality starts in this league, knows how to keep their team in it when they go out on that bump. And that's what Kyle Gibson is. 2 years ago when he was with the O's, he had a 15-9 record, an ERA of 4.73, not the best, but again, keeping you in the game, giving up only a few runs every game, keeping your offense with a chance to go out and win it. Last year with St. Louis, while a lot of people thought he had a very rough year, and especially towards the end it maybe trickled off, he ended up having even a better ERA last year at 4.24. So then, listen, there was a league-wide offensive shortage, and in my mind I was like, oh, okay, well, his ERA plus probably didn't get better. No, it got significantly better, actually. Still, you could argue that the ERA plus, or maybe not even argue, you could just read the ERA plus and say he's still a slightly below average major league starter. Yeah, maybe, but this is a depth move. And just like Grayson, he's going to need about a month or so to ramp up. This is a guy who hasn't been in camp, hasn't been doing anything other than training at home. And usually when these guys train at home, they're not really throwing that much, because the last thing you want to do without a contract is to injure your throwing arm and need surgery, and then not only have to deal with that yourself, but also not then get on a roster. So he's going to need about a month and a half to ramp up, which is perfect, gang. Give these starting five that we have to start a chance to kind of prove what they can do. And then we can make this call. We can decide what we want to do. Really, it gives Povich and Kramer, more than anyone, that time to prove why they deserve that roster spot. We've talked about how Dean Kramer can be a little inconsistent, and we're worried slightly about bringing in that left field wall and him giving up more home runs than he has, and maybe him being a little less consistent. So keep your eye on that. We've also talked about Cade Povich and how, last year before September, when he was up, it was very hit or miss. No pun intended. It was very inconsistent on what we got from Cade Povich before September last year. What are we going to see? Are we going to see the Povich that pitched in September last year and this spring training? Or are we going to see the Povich kind of reverts back to what he was to begin the year? Either way, we can survive with those two being inconsistent until the other names get back in Grayrod and Gibson and give us some reinforcements. That's the word I'm looking for. Reinforcements. But there are some ideas. Ultimately, I think Povich is the number one guy in trouble, let's say, to get sent back down to the minors when Grayrod gets healthy. Because I expect to see Grayrod before Kyle Gibson on this team. But Povich, if he's truly pitching great, or there's another injury or so, he should keep that spot. And then you look at Dean Kramer, and how's Kramer pitching? And then you also look at Albert Suarez, who should be the long relief man for us. Because if Suarez is struggling, and maybe Povich or Kramer isn't providing the best starts, but they're still okay, maybe they get moved to the bullpen as that long relief swing guy. And then Albert Suarez loses his spot. Gang, we will see what time tells. That's all we can do is sit back, watch, and kind of talk about what we expect to happen, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. It doesn't. So now, a guy that I left off of the injury report is Felix Bautista. So let's have the mounted report because we know how important Felix is. And there was some concern that Felix was not going to be available for opening day. He was still getting ramped back up. He had maybe one or two tough outings, tougher than we would like to see. The velocity may have been slightly lower than they wanted to see, despite the fact that it continued to tick up time and time again. Well, we can put those concerns to rest, gang, because the mountain is back. We have Felix Bautista getting the green light for opening day. And it's exciting, gang. I cannot wait to see the big man back on the bump. Obviously, he's a major X factor for this season as a whole. Having it become an 8-inning game for this team is everything. We saw the struggles last year with Kimbrel and whoever else we attempted to use. The year before, we saw how tough it was on this team when Bautista went down at the end of the year and how much that affected us. Now we get the big man back. Hopefully, please, God, let him stay healthy and have a very, very exciting season. The season we're used to seeing from Felix Bautista. And I expect it, gang. Again, a lot of these guys come back stronger after Tommy John. So I wouldn't doubt that Felix Bautista has maybe his best season yet, gang, left in the tank this year. I'm excited. Something maybe I talk about a little more when it comes to the betting talk of the episode. And we're motoring through this episode, gang, because there's really not much to report on Bautista other than he got the green light for opening day. He's healthy. He's that big major X factor. We all know he is. What else is left to be said, gang? So we're just going to move on to the rest of the bullpen with Felix Bautista officially on that opening day roster. And it looks like Suarez locked down that long relief swing role, despite the fact that he was a little iffy this spring. He didn't look great. Seems like the O's are going to go with him in that role to start the season. Really, then there comes a single spot up for grabs. And that spot seems to come down to one of three guys to make this team. Either Brian Baker, who really all camp we have talked about being the guy that is the most likely to make it out of these three. Now I'm starting to question that. You got 33-year-old Matt Bowman also highly in contention for the spot. And Roansy Contreras, who this whole camp I didn't expect to make the team. It didn't seem like he was the guy making a push ever. Really seemed like it was between Baker and Bowman. I still believe that to be the case. Although, listen, the O's like what they see in Contreras a bit. And he's he is out of options just like Brian Baker. So it's one of these situations that if you don't put him on the roster, if you don't put either of them on the roster, there's a good chance you lose one or both of those guys. Now, the Orioles may have signaled where their mind is at. They actually selected Matt Bowman's contract on Sunday, adding him to the 40-man, avoiding Bowman's opt-out clause. However, I believe he still needs to make the opening day roster in order to not be sent or available to other teams. So it could signal that they like Matt Bowman of the trio. And that's the guy they're going to give the spot to. I'm still iffy. I still think it's up in the air. I think the Orioles might even use today's game against the Nationals, that last exhibition game, to really lock in who gets that spot. I wouldn't be surprised if all three guys throw in this game today. And they figure it out after that. Not necessarily who had the best game today deciding it, but giving one last look into those three guys and figuring out which one you want on the roster. Outside of all of that chaos, the bullpen is locked up. You got Felix Bautista as the closer, obviously. The other righties in the pen will be Ynier Cano, Sir Anthony Dominguez. You got three lefties in Keegan Aiken, Cionel Perez, and Gregory Soto. Obviously, we said we think Suarez is going to be that long relief swing man. And then you just got that last spot between Baker, Bowman, or Contreras. And that's your bullpen, gang. I think it's one of the best in baseball. I truly do. We have found a way to harness the potential that these guys have. Because a lot of them, if not all of them, were a bit wild stallion-like when we got them. It was a bit like, hey, huge potential, but good luck harnessing it. Good luck getting it under control. Well, we've seen that success in Bautista, in Cano, in Perez. We've seen that last year, the Orioles seemed to have success with Dominguez and Soto, who also were kind of those little up and down, inconsistent, all over the place sort of guys. I love where this bullpen stands. I truly think it's a top 5 bullpen in baseball, most likely. As long as Bautista stays healthy and we keep the trajectory of everybody, this is going to be a great bullpen. And then eventually you get back Andrew Kittredge, who's going to slot into that last spot. So odds are whoever makes the team might lose their spot if there's no injuries or whatnot. Obviously, a long way, few months down the line. Andrew Kittredge is going to provide a lot for this bullpen as well. I really love everybody they got, gang. I can't emphasize it enough how good I think this bullpen is going to be for us this season. And just an X factor of why this team is going to be so successful as they are. So, it wouldn't be one of our spring training episodes, I guess, if we didn't talk about Coby Mayo. I feel like we've talked Coby Mayo every single episode so far this season. And with him getting sent to the minors and not making the team out of camp, hopefully we can go at least a few episodes without talking Coby Mayo. And hopefully the next time we do talk Coby Mayo, it's a lot of positive results. And maybe another call up to the majors in which he's ready to actually play and provide for the team. But we know he got sent back down to the minors. He did not have a good spring training. He didn't really have much of a roster spot chance anyway. But with Gunnar being on the IL to start the season, there at least was a crack in the door, as we know. Well, Coby Mayo didn't really do anything to earn that. And I think he knows this. But he had some disappointing comments, talked about how disappointed it was to get sent back, talked about how it's a lose-lose situation for him. Because either he plays well, but he's not in the majors, and he's not really learning much else in AAA, or he doesn't perform well, and out of nowhere, he's fallen out of good graces, and he's not this top prospect he was. And I get that feeling. I get all of his disappointment. I do. But again, he did not play well when he was called up last year, and he didn't play well in camp this year. He had a terrible start and ended up, having some base knocks and some decent games down the back half of his spring training. But ultimately, he finished spring training 8 for 42, a 190 batting average, no home runs from the power guy, and frankly, in spring training, when you get that breeze, when you get the smaller stadiums, it's sometimes easier to hit home runs. So no home runs for him. And again, while he finished on better results, it didn't really help any chance he had at the losing battle that he faced coming into camp, which was, we have a roster that's constructed in a way where we don't really have the spot for you right now. And, thank goodness we didn't experience injuries that opened up the spot that would have been necessary to get him on this team. Now, last year, again, he didn't perform well. He was 4 for 41 with 22 strikeouts last year in his major league stint. So the Orioles had no real reason to force him into this major league roster. And I get being disappointed. It's understandable. And I have no problem with him expressing his frustration, especially because in hindsight, he ends up walking back on those comments and, doing the professional thing, which I'm sure they told him he had to do, but I'm sure he knew he had to do. He understands the game. He understands the situation. And I'm pretty sure he understands the Orioles roster construction that's preventing him from making this roster. He understands the guys in front of him. Now, he also understands the Orioles' winning expectation this season. So, the irony in all of that, right, in him knowing how the Orioles expect to win this year and the roster construction situation that they have that doesn't really have a spot for him, is I actually feel like him being disappointed in spite of those things is a great sign for his confidence in himself and his abilities. And I say that because he's not looking at this team going, oh yeah, they have real major leaguers up there, and I'm not going to contribute any better than they are. No, he's looking at it going, I can contribute. I know how good they are, and I know how great I am. I know what I provide. So I'm hoping it really puts a spark under his ass. I'm hoping it really lights a fire in which Coby Mayo can ascend, again, dominate minor league and ascend into the major leagues, ready to contribute when his time comes. Because it's going to come. He has to force his hand a bit, sure. But his time is going to come. It's a long season, 162 games, gang. Guys are going to get hurt. Guys are going to need breaks. He'll find a spot. He'll get on the roster. He has to be ready to contribute when he gets back up on the major league roster. Also, I love the segment name that we had, Coby Mayo. I thought that was clever. And don't forget, gang, we might be the most clever Orioles podcast there is out there. Look no farther than Coby Mayo or our Baseo, AO for Baseo, AO for Mayo. And my favorite is that Baseo song, and I'm blanking a little now. Oh, boom, boom, boom. Let me hear you say Baseo, Baseo. I'm still very in love with the idea that I thought of that. Use it, Baltimore. We still got some time until Sam Baseo is hitting dingers for us in Baltimore, but by the time he gets called up, gang, that's going to be a big thing, and so will this podcast with Birdland. And one of the things that I want to give back to you guys is I want to give you guys money. Now, I can't hand you money, but what I can do is hand you advice for gambling that is going to make money. Now, not all of these bets I talk about will win, but certainly there are some that I believe is free money, gang. And take it with a grain of salt all you want. This is just me talking. It's not actual financial advice, as they would say. But, gang, betting the Orioles can make you a lot of money this season. I fully believe that. Again, usually we do a whole episode on this, but I think we can narrow it down to just this segment and kind of wrap up the episode on this betting Baltimore talk. And the first way we're going to talk about, gang, is literally bet the Orioles every single game this season. Every single game. At least up until a point. Let's call it All-Star break-ish. And then you can evaluate whether you think it's profitable to keep rolling or if it's not. And let me give you some examples, okay? First, I'm going to break down how to bet the Orioles every day. Because you just say bet the Orioles every day, you're like, okay. But how? Okay? You're going to take the money line, not the run line. Money line every single time. And I want you risking the same amount. Okay? So Pick your number, $50, $100, $250, $500, whatever you want to do. You risk that every single day. So let's say the Orioles are even money. You're going to risk 500 to win 500 or risk 50 to win 50, okay? But let's say they're minus whatever, 125, okay? Okay, so now you're risking 50 to bring back, let's say, 40. Okay, but again, you're risking the same unit every single day. So you pick that number, whether it be 50, 100, 250, 500. You name your price, gang. I don't know your finances. But I promise in the long run, especially when you look at it as a weekly thing, you're going to finish that week up money almost every single week of the season, gang. Because one, that's how good the Orioles are going to be. But two, that's how underrated the Orioles are. Okay? The Orioles don't have that elite ace Paul Skeens type name where, people in the market see it and they boost the price. Because in that case, then you're going to have to win a lot of games if you just lose that game. And if you're doing it the way I'm talking, with just risking the same amount, that $50 might only bring you back 10. And it's just not worth betting those games. But when you have that ace, you have a better chance at winning. So, now you're going to miss out on some of the wins. And that's what these Orioles team provides in the fact that between Tomo and Morden and Eflin and Povich and Kramer, and even when Grayrod gets back, and potentially even when Bradish gets back, and certainly if Kyle Gibson finds himself in the rotation, none of those names are going to command an exorbitant price in the market. So you're going to be able to be an underdog when you should be a small favorite. Should be a small favorite when you really should be a large favorite. Because there's no respect on this Orioles pitching staff. And that's a beautiful thing when it comes to gambling on a team every single day. Okay, so you risk the same amount, you bet it money line, and just watch the money pour in, gang. I'm telling you, this team is going to do it. And especially because their projected win total right now is 86.5. I fully believe that we're at least an 88 to 92 win team again. And there's a good chance that we can break 100 plus, gang. Now, let me break down real quick when to stop betting the Orioles every game, okay? Because there's really two thoughts to it, okay? Let's just look at the last two seasons. Because I did this the last two seasons, betting the Orioles every single day. And then 2 years ago, when we won 101 games, I stopped around the All-Star break, okay? I was up a lot of units. I was up big. And I said, there's a good chance the Orioles maybe don't, lose more than they win, but that it kind of gets stagnant. So I stopped. That was the wrong decision because the Orioles kept winning, kept being hot, and won 101 games and would have continued making me money. Whereas last season, I bet them for the first half of the season, and good, made good money, very good money. But then I didn't stop. I continued betting them in the second half, and we all know how bad last year's second half got. And it ended up costing me all of the money I made in the first half. So I'm saying this to explain that you have to bet the Orioles every day, but potentially to a point. And then you have to evaluate, am I okay with what I've won and kind of pack it in? Do I think they're going to continue outperforming, continue to extend past 500? Or do I think they're going to stay around that same number above 500? Or are they even going to drop lower like last year? Because if they stay around there, you can still potentially make money depending on the odds. If they're going to lose some games against, let's say, above 500 number, okay, if you understand what I'm saying. If you're going to lose some games, that's going to cost you money. But if they're going to continue extending, dang, free money continues pouring your way. So I'm telling you, this is what I am doing this season, just like I did the previous two seasons. It's been profitable for me so far, and I'm going to continue riding it. So we talked about the over-under win total being 86.5. I love the over. I really do. But typically, I don't play those that much because it's just even money bets. They don't interest me. I'm not going to put down so much money on an even money bet to make it worth my while. So I typically won't take a win total like that, even if I think it's free money. Now, let's get to some bigger payouts. And as we go, we're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger pretty much. So we're going to start with the division sitting at plus 310. Love the value. Yankees seem like they're a little down on their luck. Red Sox are everybody's darling right now. But ultimately, they're just a very injury-prone team. And I don't necessarily think they're a full, well-rounded team. I think they do have some problems in their roster construction ultimately. The Rays should be down on their luck. I could weirdly see them making the playoffs, but I'd be shocked if they competed for the division. And the Blue Jays, I think, will be solid, but I have a good feeling the Blue Jays are sitting around 500, about 10 to 12 back of the division, come the trade deadline, and they ship off anybody and everybody that is gone. I mean, they just gave Alejandro Kirk a 5-year extension. Doesn't seem like really the Blue Jays have what it takes to win it all. So at third best, sitting in the middle, odds-wise, at plus 310, I don't mind it. I like the Orioles for the division at plus 310. The AL is only at plus 650. Certainly, it's not the juiciest odds, but it just shows you that the Orioles are one of the favorites to come out of the AL and win the pennant this year. So 650 is a decent enough number where you can put down a little money and make some if they get there. I'd rather, though, go the full-blown way, which is betting them for the World Series at plus 1,600. Because that, to me, adds extra value. Usually it's about double what your pennant would be because there's teams like the Dodgers and Braves and Phillies and Mets in the NL. It actually gets a little juicier. So instead of about 1,300, which it should be priced at, it's at 1,600. So I like that. I would take that. And that way, if you win the pennant, you have that World Series bet live. And maybe you didn't win anything on the pennant, but at least this point you can back up. You can find ways to get yourself at least plus 650 odds in the grand scheme of it, payout-wise. All right. So then when you look at one that I don't necessarily think is amazing, but I certainly think has a chance, and that's the best record in baseball, plus 4,000. Certainly the Dodgers are the outright favorites for good reasons. But right now, a guy like Mookie Betts, who's pretty much number 2 in MVP on that team outside of Ohtani, Mookie's dealing with some weird virus that he got from Japan. It's really taking a toll on him. I don't know when we'll see Mookie Betts back on the field. So, something like that can take a toll. A team like the Dodgers maybe is just playing for October and starts losing their focus a little in the regular season in the dog days of summer. You already know I think the Orioles are the best team in the American League and probably have the most wins of any team in the American League. So at that point, then I'm just racing the NL. And at plus 4,000, I love the odds. I most likely will have a little bit on it. Maybe not much, $25, $50. Something solid to win 1,000 or two if they have the best record in baseball. Along those lines, you can bet them for 100-plus wins, and that's at plus 680. I love the idea of the Orioles getting back over that century mark like they did 2 seasons ago and getting to 100 wins. Could I see them falling again in the low 90s? Sure, I could. Could I see them falling in the high 80s? It's possible. I really think this team is pushing for at least 100 wins, if not best record in baseball. So I love the idea of kind of taking the two of those. And if you can get to 100, you at least come out above winning money. And if they can be the best team in baseball, you win a lot of money. I like the idea. So now let's get to some award talk, okay? Because there's certainly some guys that I believe have a real chance at making some noise when it comes to the awards. Obviously, Gunnar is one of the favorites for AL MVP. He's only sitting at plus 850, which I want to say is a little higher than it's been before the injury news and before missing opening day. Again, he's probably only going to miss a couple weeks. I don't think that that's a reason not to bet Gunnar for MVP. I just don't know if it's juicy enough at plus 850. The awards are so hard to win. They really are. They're one of the hardest bets out there on the entire card and the entire board to actually be able to see through to the end. At plus 850, it's not necessarily juicy enough for me. If you want to put in a parlay with some other guys, that I'm okay with. I did see a projection just the other day. I don't know who it was from, that Gunnar would win MVP. I could see it, obviously. He was an MVP candidate last year. But unless you're putting it in a parlay, I don't necessarily see it being juicy enough for me to personally touch. Now, two that are getting juicy enough is Adley Rutschman at plus 8,500. And again, when I say plus 850, plus 8,500, that's against a $100 bet, right? So on Gunnar Henderson, if you bet $100 to win MVP and he won, you'd win $850 plus your 100 back. So a $950 payout. Adley Rutschman, if he won MVP and you bet 100 on him, you'd get $8,500 in profit. So just to make it clear what these numbers mean. I love the idea. Adley obviously came in looking like a monster this year, has that vibe to him. He's an MVP type candidate for this team year in, year out, a la Buster Posey type guy. So I think Adley at least finds himself in the conversation eventually for one, whether it be this year or another year. So at 8,500, I think there's a lot of value on Adley there. So I really like Adley Rutschman, 8,500 for MVP. The guy I love maybe the most, though, for the Orioles, as far as odds go, is Colton Cowser, sitting at plus 18,000. So $100 would win you 18,000 in profit if Colton Cowser found himself with an MVP. And you might look at me like I'm crazy and be like, Cowser's not winning MVP. He's not even close. We broke down a few episodes ago why I think Colton Cowser could take that next jump and turn himself into Christian Yelich type player and type numbers. Put on a power showcase, hitting 40 plus, maybe even 50 plus home runs this year from Cowser. That's how hard he hits it. That's how good his barrel rate is, his hard hit rate is. And he has that left field in Camden Yards and a few other of these stadiums, whether it be Yankee Stadium or George Steinbrenner Stadium, where the Rays are going to play this year, where he's going to have a lot of these games with short right fields, easier right fields. I love the idea of maybe Cowser taking that next step and potentially being in MVP type conversations. At plus 18,000, better believe I am absolutely taking a bite out of that apple. Again, $50 would still win you $9,000 if he did it. $25 would still win you $4,500 if he did it. So I'm going to have a little taste on it. I have to. And we're going to get to a parlay later at the very end that involves three non-Orioles players. But I already have a bet with those three guys and Cowser for MVP for a massive payout. And I'm going to do the same for Adley and probably for Gunnar as well. So now let's move on to AL Rookie of the Year. Unlike last year where I had maybe 4 names I threw at you for Rookie of the Year, this year I only got one, and it's Tomo Sagano. Plus 3,000 from Tomo. And look no farther than last year with the Cubs, with Amanga, who was right up there in Rookie of the Year all season and had a fantastic year. These older, veteran Japanese players and pitchers coming into America, you somewhat have a leg up. And especially a guy like Tomo, just like Amanga, you know you're locked in on that roster spot. They didn't bring you in to send you to the minors. You're going to have a chance to pitch every 5th day. So I love at plus 3,000 the idea of Sagano at least getting himself in the Rookie of the Year contest and conversation and potentially winning it, gang. Now, another X factor is if you're using a FanDuel, DraftKings like I am for these bets, and you're live at a certain point, you may start getting cash out options. So if we get to August and Tomo is in the top 2 for AL Rookie of the Year, if you have 100 to win 3,000 on that bet, they might start offering you a cash out at 850, 1,000, 1,200, 1,500, depending on how exciting it's getting. And then you can just take the free money and not even worry if he winds up closing out the bet. So remember that in some of these cases, in some of these bets, I am strategically looking for a potential cash out at some point. If I'm essentially proven right because he's right up at the top, but I just don't want to sweat it out till the very, very end. All right, so now we got the same guy, but for 2 different awards, okay? You got AL Reliever of the Year and AL Comeback Player of the Year. And I think we all know where I'm going with this. Felix Bautista, I love, at especially the Reliever of the Year. He's the 7th highest guy in the AL, plus 1,600. Again, this is a man that was the best closer in baseball 2 seasons ago before he got hurt. A man who's absolutely dominant when he's at the top of his game. And sure, there's some big names, Mason Miller, Emmanuel Clase. I get it. There's some good names out there. Devin Williams now, who I don't necessarily see fully succeeding in New York, but that's just my opinion. Neither here or there. I love the idea of Bautista for Reliever of the Year at plus 1,600 at this point. AL Comeback Player of the Year is only plus 500. That one, not only do I like less because it's a lot lower odds, but also I think that the field's a little tougher. Listen, you got to compete with anybody coming back from an injury, and that includes a guy like Mike Trout, along with some others. So, well, Comeback Player of the Year, I probably don't touch for Bautista. Certainly Reliever of the Year at plus 1,600, I absolutely love. All right, gang, so that's pretty much my list, but I'm going to wrap up this episode and this segment with talking about that parlay involving 3 non-Orioles that I'm obsessed with, okay? I have big money already in on this parlay between just the 3 guys alone, okay? And that is Paul Skeens for Cy Young, Tariq Skubal for Cy Young, and Shohei Ohtani for MVP. It all together puts it around plus 3,200. So again, 100 win you about 3,200. Personally, I'm trying to get more around the 3 to 500 number as far as risk goes on that, because I want to be around 10 to 16, 17 G's for just those 3 guys. And before I continue talking about what I do off of that bet, remember, I'm also potentially looking for a cash out opportunity, because I'm not necessarily sitting here saying those 3 guys are absolute locks for those awards. But assuming they all stay healthy, I don't see any way that those 3 aren't at least in the conversation and right towards the top of those award watches. Paul Skeens, seems to have that Cy Young stuff every single game. And over the course of a whole season, last year he almost got himself in the Cy Young talk. This year he should absolutely get himself not only in the Cy Young talk, but right there potentially to win the Cy Young. Tariq Skubal won the Cy Young last year, so we know how solid he is. And he just seems like one of those guys that really has figured it out. He battled some injuries early in his career, kind of was a little hit or miss at times, but last year seems to be that dominant guy, and especially can get those strikeouts that helps you get to the top of that list. Playing in Comerica half his games certainly will help his ERA and stuff, as it's not easy to hit home runs in that park. So I love the idea of him at least being right in the top 2 or 3 again for Cy Young down the stretch. And then you have Shohei Ohtani, who we know is just kind of a cheat code when it comes to MVPs, because he's going to be coming back and pitching now. He's a cheat code just hitting-wise. And certainly when he's pitching, what that does to his WAR and his value is just unmatched. So again, assuming those three guys stay healthy, I don't see any chance that they're at least not right in the hunt of it come August and September. Leaving me the potential to maybe get a very, very nice cash out on that bet and not have to sweat it out the whole season, but still maybe walk away with 5 figures off of those 3 guys. Now, off of those 3 guys, because at the moment you can do a 4-guy parlay with awards. I don't think you can do more than 4. But if you do Skeens, Cy Young, Skubal, Cy Young, and then Ohtani, MVP, that leaves one thing, AL MVP, to really pepper with. So then I already have the bet with those 3 and Colton Cowser for MVP. I also have it those 3 with Bobby Witt. And before opening day, I'll have it those 3 with Gunnar and Adley. So that just is going to boost your odds, especially when you do the ones with Cowser and Adley. Certainly Gunnar and Witt have much lower odds, more those favorites. And listen, I'm not sitting here saying I'm some complete expert. I'm giving you 3 favorites at their awards. And typically, I'm not the guy to suggest the outright favorites. But I think these 3, especially Skeens and Ohtani, are almost locks to be right at the top of that voting, if not the top. And then Skubal, again, hopefully we see the Skubal we saw last year if you have this bet. And then out of nowhere, he's at least right in the conversation again, and you have a real shot at, again, at least getting a decent cash out, if not completely cashing for the top number. But then if you want to start adding in, sprinkling in a 4th guy for AL MVP in there, Gunnar will help add some value for sure at 850. Adley at 8,500 will add a lot of value. And Cowser at plus 18,000 will add an insane amount of value. So that's essentially going to wrap it up. I will tell you, I do have a very, very, very long shot bet as well on Jackson Holiday MVP, parlayed with CJ Abrams NL MVP. I don't think either's really going to get in the conversation, but I kind of love the idea of these 2 young middle infielders from the DMV area, from the Beltway battle, making this run to MVP contention. And certainly they both have a top pedigree and the power and speed and contact balance to kind of create a numbers or a stat line that might put them in MVP talks if they're having one of their best years or their best year so far. So I wanted to say that just because I don't want to get to a point where that's live and you guys all look at me like I'm crazy. I don't have much money on it, but it's to pay a very, very large number as they're both sitting at around, I think, like 18,000, 20,000. Parlay the 2 together and can win a lot of money, gang, if that comes to fruition. So we're going to wrap up this episode, a phenomenal episode as spring ends, tying the bow on spring training, headed into the regular season. I could not be any more excited. Real games start Thursday, gang, and that is the next time we will see you. So make sure you go to our Instagram, TikTok, X account at Talkin Orioles Baseball. Interact with us. We're going to have a lot of good content coming your way on those platforms this season. Be sure to check us out too every Monday and Thursday this season like clockwork, coming your way with another episode of the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. We appreciate you, gang. Cannot wait for Thursday. Let's go, O's!